Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For those in the US, good morning, and for those in between the US and the Middle East, good afternoon, and those in India and Asia, good evening. My name is Kathleen Byron. I'm the CEO of Mowgli, and on behalf of my team, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Mentoring Effect on Economic Growth webinar today. Firstly, thank you for your patience. We have just been waiting for a few more registrants to join, but without further ado, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Tony Burry, who is the founder and chairman of Mowgli.
Hi there, welcome everybody. Great to be with you. And I find today very exciting because we've been waiting for this report to come out for some time. But first I'd like to introduce myself. I am a serial entrepreneur, having set up something like 18 businesses, 14 of those in the Middle East. And during that time setting business in the Middle East, I actually had a 50-year relationship. I sometimes call it a love affair with the Middle East. And the latter part of my journey has been in philanthropy when I founded Mowgli. The session purpose today is to provide context as to the real importance of entrepreneurship in today's world. Not only in the Middle East, but actually worldwide. To introduce Mowgli and share where we are today with Mowgli, to share the significant findings of the return on mentoring investment analysis undertaken for the Mentoring Effect on Economic Growth paper, but also to share some of the lessons learned from the analysis, because they are really interesting for you to learn, and also to share, and also for you to comment upon. And then finally to engage with you and answer any questions you may have. So what we'd like to do first of all is to do a poll to find out who we actually have on the call. And you can signify whether you are entrepreneurs, or whether you're mentors, or whether you're organizations involved in entrepreneurship support activities, or whether you're funders of entrepreneurship support activities. So if you can just let us know who's here now by doing a poll, that would be great. Okay. How do we get the answers, Kat?
So I think we can close the poll now. I think we're just, here we go.
So 25% are entrepreneurs, 35% are mentors, significantly 78% of people involved in entrepreneurship support activities, which is great. And funders of entrepreneurship support activities is 8%. So that's what we have in the room now. I'd be interested, by the way, at the end of the call to see where we are. We may get that luxury later on. So going forward, what I'd like to share with you is that the world organizations have been saying continuously that there is within our society a deepening income inequality, a persistent jobless growth, and a lack of leadership in our society. And this is resonated by the World Economic Forum, IMF, World Bank, and particularly we need to address the high unemployment, which is a long-standing issue within the MENA region. When we look at those three issues, there are some potential solutions where we can be involved. The first one is around deepening income inequality. Because here, if we champion entrepreneurship, and particularly if we champion micro-entrepreneurship, that will get more people into employment and actually allow them to create greater wealth for themselves compared to others. Within jobless growth, persistent jobless growth, we need entrepreneurs to create that employment. And finally, within lack of leadership, we need to have more empowered mentors and entrepreneurs in our society. And just on leadership, my definition of leadership is simple: to serve is to lead. And I can't think of a greater service that you can provide to another human being than mentoring them. And that is why mentoring and leadership go hand in hand, as mentoring is at the heart of leadership. So why are entrepreneurs important? Well, firstly, they create wealth for development of our societies. They drive economic regeneration through innovation. They create the majority of the new employment within the world. And as part of their journey, they become philanthropists. It's significant that 95% of the world's philanthropists are entrepreneurs, both financially and also socially. And finally, entrepreneurs believe passionately in social democracy and empowerment. Those 5 reasons mean that we're passionate about empowering entrepreneurs as we go forward. But a really significant area of support is the entrepreneurial ecosystem requirements. And it has 4 main pillars. You have the environment, you have human capital, you have finance, you have infrastructure. And we've identified some of the key elements within each of those on this particular slide for you. So we'd like to do a further poll, and we'd like to ask the question, which part of the ecosystem do you believe is the most important to spur entrepreneurial growth? Is it infrastructure? Is it environment? Is it finance? Or is it human capital? So let's just see what the poll shows us, the feelings of the people on the call as we speak. So Kat, you'll close it off when you want to, okay?
Yeah, we'll give it another 10 seconds and then close that out.
Great stuff.
Okay, we'll close that now and bring the results up.
So I'm delighted to see how human capital gets the top billing. The environment, 38%, also gets a high billing. And then infrastructure and finance have the same. I'm surprised. I'm delighted. Because most times when we run the poll, in previous years, human capital has not been number 1. It's usually been financial capital, which is interesting for today's discussion. So let's just talk about human capital development. We go through school, we learn knowledge and skills. We go through universities, we get degrees, and again we get further knowledge and skills. When we leave university, how is our human capital developed thereafter? There are 4 main ways in which that is developed. The first one is through training. Secondly, we need lots of advice wherever we go in our lives. Thirdly, we do need to coach to improve our performance. But fourthly and critically and separately is mentoring. And just to share with you, for us, mentoring is a process in which the mentor and the mentee, through their interaction, empower the mentee to take on and have the confidence to take on the risk of failure, the overcoming of the barriers that exist around us and all the challenges around status quo. And that is why mentoring is specifically different. It's not advice, it's not coaching, it's not training. It's about empowerment of the human being to take a greater aspect in terms of risk and making sure they overcome that risk and succeed. For these entrepreneurs, they go on a journey through startup, when they lose money, and eventually, if they're lucky, they break even. At that point in time, if they go through the startup and they don't have a mentor with them, they're lonely, they're depressed, they become stressed, and many of them suffer as a result of that, both psychologically as well as financially. That's a critical phase when they need a mentor. And then when they're successful, they get through cash positive and they're now making their way. They want to go through growth. And typically the DNA of an entrepreneur is not conducive to what is required in growth. Growth requires business processes, organization, administration, frameworks, legal structures. So they need to bring on somebody else alongside them who has the capability of doing that and sharing in the glory. Typically it's a mentor who persuades the entrepreneur that's the course of action they should go. And then thirdly, and you'll find this amusing, when they become really successful. When they become successful, their ego starts to increase. They become arrogant. And at that point in time, they have what I now call the Tiger Woods moment, when all around them falls apart. I could spend hours on the hero's journey. I just want to share it with you, number 1. But secondly, and more importantly, I want to share with you this facing the darkness. This is the storm that entrepreneurs go through. This is when you're in startup and you don't know where to go. You may be becoming bankrupt. You haven't told your wife that you've got a mortgage on the business. At that point in time, if you're successful, you will have learnt a lot, and you take that into a new perspective in life. If you fail, you need support. You need support in two ways to bring you through it, but secondly, to make sure you have learned all the lessons of your failure. So you take that through to a new perspective. And it's significant that entrepreneurs go around this journey time and time again. I told you earlier, I've been 18 times around this journey. And I love being in that storm. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but I learn a lot and I grow as a human being as a result. So as we move forward, what is required? We need to see that there's more attention paid to the short and long-term financial and non-financial benefits that Entrepreneurial offers. It is and should always be a core pillar of human capital capacity development. Let's just go back. If a human being is not empowered, we're wasting our time training them, giving them advice, and finally coaching them. So we need to make sure that mentoring is part of that to empower them so they can take advantage of all the other aspects of human development. We need to see that more investment needs to be dedicated to ensure the quality of mentoring that is offered to entrepreneurs. And how is that achieved? It's through the training and preparation of mentors. It's through the effective matchmaking of mentor to entrepreneur. And then the facilitation of the ongoing support and supervision of the mentoring relationship during the first year to allow the relationship to solidify so it can be taken forward on a long-term engagement. Now, who is Mowgli? We are a UK headquartered foundation, a not-for-profit foundation, which provides mentoring across the region in the Middle East and North Africa. And I'm proud to say at the end of 2015, we were able to achieve all the goals that we set out in 2008. So we're in a transition phase at the moment, having achieved those goals, to see how we can take this forward and scale up, particularly within the Middle East and North African region. And if we look at our impact data, we've done a large number of programs. We've got an alumni of over 1,680, and we've created a number of jobs and safeguarded a number of jobs, which is great. And we've matched 780 entrepreneurs across the region, developed a facilitator pool, and been awarded various aspects to our mentoring program, both in Europe and also in the Middle East. And if we look at the side of the infographic, you see the number of entrepreneurs created, the number of jobs created, absolutely. I want to highlight two in particular for you at the bottom. 95% of our entrepreneurs safeguard the employees that they have at the beginning of the year. And 88% of the businesses run by Mowgli entrepreneurs were sustainable at the end of the period. That means to say they have still contained in business. And during startup, that is really an important element. So what do? So Mowgli provides mentoring programs that inspire, connect, and guide entrepreneurs and leaders to overcome life's personal and business challenges. So I can't emphasize enough that we are holistic human beings. We have our personal lives and our business lives are completely as one. They cannot be separated. So what's affecting your business life affects you in your personal life and vice versa. And this is achieved by training and nurturing mentors, strengthening the entrepreneurs in their businesses by matching them with a trained mentor, and finally to create a global community of trained mentors and entrepreneurs so they continue their network and their learning and their growth opportunities that they have. And we are driven by three key areas of impact. We're looking at economic growth, we want to see business growth, and we also want to see personal growth. And these three need to go in tandem. This is what Mowgli is about. Now I want to take you to the return on investment, because why did we do this? We wanted to answer the question, first of all, for ourselves, because we as a family were the major donor into Mowgli over the last 8 years. Are we making a difference? And are we making a return on investment? And then, therefore, if we are, we can then ask others to come and join us. So what is a return on investment for those who invest in mentoring as a component of human capital or capacity development? So what was our methodology? Well, first of all, we ensured that our methodology was verified by an independent consulting organization in the UK called BDO. And the analysis we carried out only includes government and corporate funded one-year mentoring programs that have been delivered and completed by Mowgli or with a third party over the past 8 years. And the ROMI, which is the return on mentoring investment, is made up of the number of jobs created plus the number of jobs safeguarded times the only source we're able to find in the Middle East, the average pre-tax annual salaries, which gave us an economic generation. And then we divided that by the project investment that was being made in those programs. And when we look at the results, we were delighted to see 890% of the total ROMI we achieved. But significantly, the number of 455% is for the creation of new jobs, whereas 435% was for safeguarding. If we look at the countries, you'll notice that Lebanon had the highest ROMI at 1,660%, and then Jordan at 1,520%. I said we'll go through later the lessons learned. There's a number of interesting facets around that. And it's not surprising that Lebanon was number one, because it has the greatest developed entrepreneurship ecosystem. However, what it does show is they get a huge return on investment for investing in mentoring. I just want to highlight Algeria, because I think Algeria was very interesting because it's got a nascent and somewhat closed and fragmented entrepreneurial ecosystem. But this result was outstanding for them, and this is an encouraging insight for future investment decisions. I want to showcase, however, the one outlier which made the biggest difference of all in terms of job creation. He's a gentleman called Mazin Khalil. He's founder and CEO of Suleiman Med out of Sudan. He was a Mowgli entrepreneur in 2013. He was able to create and safeguard 568 full and part-time jobs during his mentoring year. And I'm proud to say that he has gone on record many times over to say he personally attributes 100% of his achievements to being empowered during this year by his mentoring relationship. Significantly, I'd just like to share, because it was an outlier, we have not included this data in the overall analysis. So what are our 5 key takeaways in our analysis that the lessons learned which we want to share with you? First of all, I call it holistic mentoring because it's around the whole human being, personal and also business. Clearly, it ensures greater return on investment. And by putting that investment through the individual, it then leverages all of the other training they get in terms of business skills training, financial support, and therefore can be regarded as a key cornerstone within every entrepreneurial ecosystem or support initiative. The second one, I said earlier, we learned from Lebanon, is that if you have a developed and harmonized entrepreneurial ecosystem, you achieve higher ROI. And locations that have a poor ecosystem clearly have lower ROIs in terms of their development. So we need to enable high job creation levels, but also we must safeguard the jobs created. And then through this process, we came across a continual highlighting of a formula which we created, which is capability minus interference equals success. I think this is really, really important for all of you within MENA, because if you take an average entrepreneur and they have minimum interference, they can be successful. If you take a below average entrepreneur and you have high interference, they will fail. So what is this interference, first of all? It's both in the personal lives and also in the business lives. And that's why the elements of the ecosystem to change the environment and the infrastructure are important, the environment really important. But also in the personal lives. We have one country in which the mentors of our program told us that they spent more than 50% of their time mentoring the entrepreneurs on their personal issues, then allowing them to get to the business issues. So this interference is a key element. The other thing which came out of the analysis is investment in equals return on investment out. In a number of occasions, we were asked by funders and donors and project managers to make a changed to our methodologies and reduced the cost. We have found in the analysis that when we did that, the return on investment was significantly lower, in many cases exponentially lower. So, as they say, you pay for what you get. And finally, values-based project management ensures greater return on investment. Project management, alignment, and commitment to adhering to program milestones is critical to optimizing the success of the program. Programs managed by third parties have typically produced lower returns than projects led by Mowgli. So we have the report on the website. You're more than welcome to go there. But I don't want to keep on talking. I actually want to have an engagement with you. So can we open it up for questions? And please, I hope some of you already asked questions. If you haven't, please do, because we now want to proceed with the questions. Thank you. Kat?
Hi, thank you for that. And I understand that some people might be having some difficulties hearing. I hope that during the course of the last 20 minutes you've been able to hear what was being said. We do have a couple of questions that already come through, so if you do have any, please do send them through. The first question is, how can mentoring be used effectively within a context of conflict resolution to achieve goals?
Ooh, that's a good question. Basically, mentoring is about getting into your soul. And one of the things which we found in our early days of mentoring in the Middle East is it doesn't matter what nationality, what religion, what culture. Deep down in our souls, we are the same. We're all built of the same flesh and blood. And therefore, once you have a mentoring relationship where the mentor is acting solely in the interests of the mentee and putting the mentee's interest first, then the conflict resolution takes place. If, however, the mentor is not coming from that angle, conflict will then pervade. Now, if the question is being asked, can we use mentoring to, for example, have conflict resolution within the region today with all the various aspects? I don't know, I've not tried. What I do know is that whenever you have a mentoring relationship, it's very rare that you have any conflicts because the mentor is there to solely act in the interest of the mentee. And if he, however, has conflicts because he has his own agenda, he is not a mentor, as we would describe. If that person would like to come back and ask Kat a supplementary question, I'm more than happy to answer it.
Sure, will do. Thank you. And we have another question here, which is, on what components of the entrepreneurial ecosystem should donors focus their interventions in order to maximize the impact from mentoring?
Okay, well, let's just go back quickly, because that comes back to the ecosystem here. So we have that as the ecosystem. Where should donors focus their money? The easy answer, they should focus on everything. But that'll be an easy answer. So I would say to you that we need to see a greater investment, not in terms of financial investment, but in terms of political persuasion, to make sure that countries have the right policies and the right government policies. So as an example, having a bankruptcy law in a country, if you don't have bankruptcy laws, why should an entrepreneur expose themselves to all of the risks of unlimited liability? Secondly, property rights. But this is not money, this is not where investments required. This is investment not in terms of finance, but in terms of political persuasion. They've got to get that right. In terms of the environment, there is a certain element in there which requires investment. And I think something should go, for example, into making sure that the educational system is conducive to entrepreneurship. So let me highlight that for you and unpack that slightly. In primary education, there's two key elements to help entrepreneurs. develop. First, they need to be taught curiosity, and second, they need to be taught skepticism. And then second, when they go through secondary education, they need to be developed in their problem-solving skills. If they can't solve problems, they will not produce solutions which can be used as an entrepreneur to be successful. Secondly, they have to understand the art of communication to multi-stakeholders during education. And thirdly, they need to have a proper business networking capability. So some in the environment. But I would suggest to whoever asked the question, there's two areas that come out. I believe that the investment in human capital needs to be at least equal to that in the finance capital until such time as the human capital flow is significant enough that it will then automatically attract finance from around the world. There's a very interesting paper written in 2012 by McKinsey in which it said that the Middle East needs for SMEs $147 billion. And it only had at that time $1 billion available for SME development. But if you enhance the human capital, you will attract the financial capital. So I think equal between human capital and finance, and ultimately finance will be much greater than human capital after it's been developed. Thanks, Gav.
Thank you for that. And I'm just going to join a couple of questions that are around the same topic together. You've mentioned that the next phase is scale up. So what is Mowgli's strategy for scaling up, and what are the top 3 steps we need to take to scale up? And then merging with another question is, are there any plans to expand the program outside the MENA region? And if so, what area might be targeted?
Okay, so the plan for going forward is to seek to find, within countries who are really interested in mentoring, to find people who are prepared to own within their country the development of local mentoring organizations. So you want to see them, the leadership, the ownership and the management vested within a local mentoring organization established within each country or organization. And by doing so, we would hope to be able to scale up within that country, because then it becomes part of it. And we as Mowgli see our role as being the empowerment by giving them access to our intellectual property, to our processes, to our designs, to everything we can give them as part of that. And in fact, I just want to share with you that yesterday I was in Zurich because we're looking to achieve funding from a major donor who would actually help us create that as an institutional framework which can be delivered to any local mentoring organization. So what are the top 3 steps? The top 3 steps are finding local leadership and ownership who are willing and able to take on this really important task of local mentoring organizations. That's number 1. Second one is, having achieved that, is to make sure that the community, private sector, the civil society, governments support the development of that local mentoring organization, so it has a regular flow of funding and it also has a regular flow of support, so that programs can be held locally within the country. And the third one is the initial capital that will be required to establish these local mentoring organizations. So, for example, we have just finished a business plan for this, and we would seek to have funding provided by both people inside the Middle East, but also outside the Middle East, to establish these local mentoring organizations. So those would be my top 3 steps, Kat. Have I answered the question okay?
Yep, I believe so. Thank you. If anybody has any further questions on that, I'm sure, please do send them through, and I'm sure that we can pick that up either during the webinar or afterwards. Okay, so another question's come in. I'm curious how you define the difference between coaching and mentoring in this context.
Okay. So coaching is around performance, and in performance we're looking at your competency level. So let's just take a simple competency called managing complexity, which is something which we all have in our lives today. And let's just dissect that a little bit more. When you're looking at competency, it is made up of 3 separate categories. It's skills, knowledge, and behavior. 3. So let's take a human being who has level 4, the highest level skills, and he has level 4, the highest level of knowledge. If his behaviors are level 1, his competence is not the average, which would be 3, it is 1. So let me give you an example in terms of managing complexity. If you do an analysis and you have 3 data points, or you have an analysis which has 20 data points, the chances are your analysis with 20 data points is far more, your confidence level in that analysis is far greater. That is the behavior. You've already got the skills to do the analysis, you've already got the knowledge of the analysis, but the behavior is to gather 20 data points. That's an example. So the performance is around making sure the right behaviors are coupled with the right skills and the right knowledge to enhance your competency of managing complexity. What is mentoring doing? So we all have, within our daily lives, lots of personal challenges, lots of business challenges. I'm mentoring at this moment in time a particular entrepreneur, and I've been doing so for some time, who's in financial difficulties. The bank have reneged on him, they have withdrawn their support, he hasn't got a bank account open. How does he live his life? How does he protect himself? How does he manage his relationship with his family? Because they're all exposed at this moment in time. So the mentoring here is to empower him to have the confidence to take it forward and to really battle through those issues and not just allow it to overwhelm him. I use that as one example. I've got many more examples. Again, I hope that has been distinguishing between mentoring and coaching. But if not, whoever asked the question, I'm more than happy to take it slightly further. Kat?
Great, thank you. Another sort of 2 questions kind of combine into one, which is around investing in either an entrepreneur or one of the entrepreneur businesses, which is, does Mowgli own any stake in the companies that they mentor? And secondly, do you see a conflict? Do you see it as a conflict when a mentor becomes an investor in the mentee's business?
Absolutely. You cannot be a mentor to somebody and have their interests at heart if you have a vested interest in the outcome. So if you've invested in a business, you cannot mentor them because you will not be acting in the best interests of that entrepreneur. Let me give you an example which happened a few years ago. Without mentioning any names of organizations, we did a trial with a private equity firm within the Middle East who was investing in SMEs. And we provided the mentors and they provided the capital. It never went any further because after 6 to 8 months, the private equity said very clearly to us, your mentor is not helping us in our relationship with our entrepreneur. We want the entrepreneur to accept our terms and conditions. There's a direct conflict because the investor is looking to protect his interests, and in this case here, do not see the value of having a mentor. So we have to be very clear that where a business has an investor, I have repeated many times in public, one of the reasons why angel investors are really important to development of entrepreneurs is because A, they make the capital investment, but B, they sit on the neck of the entrepreneur to make sure that they deliver, but they do not mentor that entrepreneur. Kat?
Yep, no, thank you. Another question's come in. Have you found differences in the way that people interact and benefit from the mentoring relationships between North Africa and the Levant?
So what I want to get back to that slide, if you don't mind. There we go. What I'm doing is, Kat, can you just help me slightly? What I would like to hear as a poll, if we could run a poll, Kat.
I don't think we can set a poll up as of yet, just because they need to be pre-set up.
Okay. So if we look at the Levant, you'll see that Lebanon and Jordan had the highest performing countries, which is the Levant. And you'll then see that a number of countries, which was Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, all had roughly the same. performances, interesting enough. And then, of course, it dropped down after that. So there was a difference between North Africa and the Levant. And I think that's for a number of reasons. First of all, the Levant has a much more developed ecosystem. Secondly, the entrepreneurs who we saw in the programs, in Lebanon in particular, were of a high caliber. If I go back to my earlier one about capability minus interference, they were really high caliber. And in Jordan, almost same, but just slightly below. So the entrepreneur capability is a really important facet between the Levant and the North Africa. And I think the development of an ecosystem in North Africa is coming on, but it's not as developed as Levant. Let's just talk about harmonized. What do we mean by harmonized ecosystem? What I mean by that is the various actors within the ecosystem working together collaboratively for the benefit of the entrepreneur. We have certain countries within the region who do not have a harmonious ecosystem. In fact, I'm thinking of one country in particular where the ecosystem is toxic to each other, which brings down the benefits that can go to the entrepreneur. So those are the reasons why there's a difference, and yes, we have seen a difference. But I think North Africa is coming up. Kat?
Great, thank you. And sort of a similar-ish question, based upon the experiences to date, do you see any material differences in the mentoring ROMI between mature and developing economies? So not necessarily between North Africa and Levant, but between the maturity level of the economies.
So it's interesting. If I was a younger entrepreneur today, and I had a choice of setting up a business in the Middle East and North Africa, or in, say, Europe, I would set up in the Middle East and North Africa, even today. And the reason for that is that the level of competition in terms of businesses is less in the region than it is in Europe. So if I go back to my capability minus interference equals performance, the competitive interference in Europe is high. You've got to be really good to overcome that competitive interference. But in the region, it is not high. So you can still, given a certain capability, still perform and get a performance. So I hope that answers that question. But basically, it's the interference from Europe is much higher, and the States as well. Now, you will tell me that there's lots of people being successful. The answer is yes, but their capability is much higher. I think I go back. Entrepreneurs are created through parenting. They're created through primary education. They're created through secondary education. The vast majority of the entrepreneurs we currently have within MENA are individuals who've already been parented, already been gone through primary and secondary education. And that part of their journey was not conducive to developing entrepreneurship within them. So I think we have to be clear that we need to get that right for the future, but it was not right for the past. Pat?
Okay, thank you. Given the large number of people who need mentoring and professional development, what have you learned about how to select who should be in your programs?
So we do have a rigorous selection process in terms of both the mentors and the mentees. And we have this process done on the basis of, for example, with mentors, we do want to have a mentor who has at least 10 years business experience, who has had profit and loss responsibility, and if possible, have cash flow responsibility, because those are the really three things the entrepreneur needs. But secondly, that mentor must have certain personal characteristics. So let me share with you just a couple of those personal characteristics they need to have. Firstly, if a mentor has a high level of ego, he can never put the interests of the mentee ahead of himself or herself. So ego is a clear discriminator against people who can come onto our program and who can mentor properly by them. Yes, they can advise. Yes, they can coach, but they can't mentor. And the second one is what I call ripeness. are they in a stage of their life where they're ripe for the experience? And the best example I can give you is one which we had in Syria a number of years ago, where we had the unfortunate case where one of our mentors had come out of a rocky divorce, and he mentored a female entrepreneur, and unfortunately his baggage overflowed. So are they right for that experience? Is a really important one. And then coming to the entrepreneur, is the entrepreneur prepared to listen? So if the entrepreneur is not prepared to listen and engage, there's absolutely no point in having that individual on the program. We're also looking at the entrepreneurs on each program, which typically a program is 12 entrepreneurs and 12 mentors, by the way, is to have entrepreneurs at different stages of their growth. So startup entrepreneurs, yes. Break-even entrepreneurs, yes. Growth entrepreneurs, yes. And established SMEs, yes. And also to have, if we can, a couple of social entrepreneurs on the program as well. Because we're trying to get a diversity within the program and within the cohort, so they're able to also to learn off each other. So those are the things which we learned during the process of our mentoring to date. And selection is really important.
Great, thank you. And through the mentoring process, if a mentee has limited capabilities or abilities, how do you feel he can know that the mentor is actually acting in his or her interest? And how can we know if the mentor is being fair in his mentoring?
So I said earlier, this is all around about the soul, the human soul. And part of our program to train the mentors is for them to tap into themselves, into the journey that they're going to go on and mentor somebody. And if the mentor is not prepared to go through that program where they are going to put themselves at total service to the mentee, we will not have them on the program, number one. And if they demonstrate it during the program, we'll take them off. So it really is about the human being being there for that mentor, sorry, for that mentee. Can you just refresh the question? I didn't write it down this time.
Sure. Through the mentoring process, if a mentee has limited capabilities and or abilities, how can we know that the mentor is acting in his or her best interest? And then how do we know if the mentor is being fair in his or her mentoring?
Okay. So within our program, one of the areas, I mentioned it earlier when I said when certain organizations have asked us to cut back the budget, we've had to take out certain parts of the program. So our process is where we have a one-year relationship between the mentor and mentee, which is facilitated and supported by us. So every quarter we have what we call peer calls, and we also have what we call Mowgli jams to reconnect people. And during that process, we're able to monitor how the relationships are going and which ones need support and which ones do not need support. And you get a very, very clear indication. And we have had some cases, by the way, where at the end of 3 months, 6 months, the relationship finishes and we've had to rematch that entrepreneur to somebody else to make sure they're supported. So it's not a 100% system of success. It's around about 85 to 88%. Limited capabilities. So one of the areas that the mentor must do is, if they find an entrepreneur who does have limited capabilities, is to look at to identify what they are and ask the mentee to identify what they are, and then to try and put in place a recovery program so they're able to have either training or to have advice. So for example, let's say it's a marketing issue. Go out and get a marketing advisor. Reach out to somebody who can give you that right marketing advice. Maybe you work in the health sector, so you get a marketing advisor who's relevant to the health sector. Get that piece of advice on board. Maybe they need some coaching. So it's really important that the mentor steers that entrepreneur into certain areas where they can increase their capabilities. Kat?
Great, thank you. Another question is, do we do any virtual mentoring in our programs, or is it all done in person? And if virtual, what have we found to work and what doesn't work?
So there are a number of virtual programs out there where it's all done on the web, and it's like they go on, they match. Our experience has been, and we've not checked that out, all relationships, as you can imagine, is that they are really, really good tools for advice. So they're able to link into people who can provide advice to them, and maybe even some coaching, some training for them. Really good in doing that. But when it comes down to getting inside the soul of the entrepreneur by the mentor, there has to be some human bonding take place at the very beginning. So most of our relationships start off with the human bonding, and then to a very large extent, it is done remotely. Let me share with you, I have 10 mentors in my life, and today, all 10 of them are done remotely using virtual techniques, Skype, etc. And then, in some cases, once a year, once a quarter, I might meet them somewhere for coffee, but the majority of the exercise is done virtually. But the human bond has been established, the respect, the trust has been established to allow me to open up to them what my challenges are, what my difficulties are, what are my opportunities, what should I be doing to grow what I'm doing. And by the way, that's a key point for a mentor to do, is to make sure that the entrepreneur is reaching the limits of capability. So expressing themselves and taking themselves forward. Kat?
Thank you very much. And there's one here which is, what exactly do you mean by holistic mentoring? Just to be a little bit more explicit on it.
So holistic mentoring, as I said earlier, is around the human being, both in their personal lives and in their business lives. So we face, through our lifetimes, significant personal challenges. And the example I can give, because it's one that's relevant to me, is back in 1988, my wife was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and is today in a wheelchair. It is really tough as an entrepreneur when your wife is in that condition. And I had a mentor who took me through it and allowed me to, A, enjoy my life, B, be a successful entrepreneur. But if I hadn't had the mentor there, I'd have been suffocated by it. That's in the personal life. In the business life, it's around what are the key challenges. So the key challenge, for example, within Mowgli at the end of 2015 is, where do we take Mowgli forward in the future? How do we get the strength of energy to be able to pursue it? So the mentor helps you look at what those options are, looks at, is it what you want to do? If it's not something that we want to do, then we should say we've done our job, we've taken mentoring to the Middle East, we achieve our goals, and then move out. So the mentor helps you work through the issues, even if it's a business issue, from a personal perspective. Is it what you want to do? Kat?
Thank you. And can you give any examples of how mentoring can be empowering? And is it about confidence, skills, or something different?
Yeah, okay. Again, I have to share personal stories. These are ones I know very well. So at the age of 16, I failed with absolute distinction every subject I was studying at school. And if it wasn't for, in particular, one teacher who became a mentor of mine, who brought me through that and gave me the capability and the support and assistance, by the way, to be able to take on the academic subjects at that time, and enabling me to reach the minimum number of O-levels as we have in the UK, which allowed me to go to sixth form, and then took me through sixth form, and again, through his encouragement, his empowerment of me, I got A-levels and I went to university. I use that as an example. And by the way, if I look at where I am today compared to where I was at that time, that continuous development of myself is something which I highlight to all people. I think there's another example which I'd love to share with you, is a Moroccan lady, and I forgive her now because I can't remember her name. She had been doing an interior design business for many years at a certain turnover. And one of her comments to me was that the mentor challenged her why she was not taking on larger projects. And she couldn't take on larger projects because she didn't have the confidence to do so. So collectively between them, they worked on how she could do larger projects. And he was able to take her through a risk mitigation exercise, so she was able to mitigate against the risks of going forward. I'm delighted to tell you the last time I saw her, she has now trebled her turnover of her business. She's now taking on, within Morocco, government contracts, which are something like 10 times the size of her previous projects. And her business is really flying because she had the confidence to take on the risk. And I go back, I mentioned that earlier, that's what mentoring is about. Having the confidence and challenging the risk of failure. And as you know, within the Middle East, there's a culture of not taking on failure. And without doing that, entrepreneurs will not be successful. Kat?
Great, thank you. We've just got 5 minutes left of the webinar, so I'm just going to, there's still a few questions coming through, so I'm just going to sift through them as we go. The formula for calculating the return on mentoring investment seems to include both economic and business growth, but does it also include personal growth? And if so, how do we measure this?
So the return on investment is purely a return on investment. It's a financial mechanism to measure that growth. So what we do at the end of the year of the mentoring relationship, we ask the mentee, various questions to understand how they have grown and in what way they've grown. And this provides us the feedback. I mean, we will have a new impact report coming out in April, May. And inside that, we'll capture all of the data which we have around personal growth, because it's really important that we get that feedback. So if you look at the existing one, is it still on the website, Kat?
Yes, it is, yes.
So the existing one has the data from a couple of years ago. This one will have the data right up to date. Kat?
Thank you. What are the optimal characteristics, profile, and legal status of a local partner to provide leadership and ownership for implementing mentoring in a new territory?
What are the optimal? Okay. First of all, that they are willing to have the leadership, and they're prepared to encompass everything that means. And that means that they wish to embrace the values we have. They are prepared to take the role of leading an organization, maybe on a board of governors or board of directors. They're prepared to bring in other people alongside them, multi-stakeholder, so we get a broad level of support, not just one individual, but a broad level of support. And to reach out into the society locally to make sure we get the right management into the local mentoring organization, not necessarily friends of theirs. And then to look at how we can get people on side inside the country who would be prepared to support such a program by wanting to invest in mentoring. And to get that investment in so we can run programs, and through the running of the programs, we create a local, sustainable local mentoring organization. This has to be on a multi-stakeholder basis. So not just one individual or 2 or 3 friends getting together. It needs to be a broad base of people, and it's having the ability. Secondly, is a preparedness to be involved in an organization that has open governance, that they're held accountable and held responsible in a manner which many organizations are not, because that is the only way in which we will be involved if there is that open governance process. And thirdly, I think what's required is for them to want to go on a personal growth of their own. I can tell you I have learned so much from Mowgli. It's incredible. And they can learn so much. And then with that, they can then give back. Kat?
Thank you. Okay, so we've just got literally 1 minute left, so I'm just going to leave the last question with you. How can we use mentoring during conflict and war to really help entrepreneurs sustain in the market?
Okay, yeah. So let me share the story of Syria. We had something like 18 entrepreneurs from 2 programs in Syria. And each of the businesses in Syria were doing well in Syria. And when the war came, every single one of those businesses created. And what we have done is to try and re-establish them outside Syria. So in fact, there's a number of them in Dubai, there's a number in Sharjah, there's one actually in Saudi Arabia at this moment in time. we have not been able, and because an example was, there was one of them, I remember very well. He was a travel agent. Overnight, his business went from whatever it was to zero. There was no incoming business. So we couldn't sustain his business in the country, but I'm delighted to say he's doing very well indeed in Dubai. He's no longer got his own business. He's a partner in a travel agency business in Dubai. So that's what we have tried to do, and I would love to run a program of mentoring refugee entrepreneurs living outside that home country. But today, for example, in Syria, we cannot do so, with great regret. I just want to highlight one other aspect of that story which I didn't share with you. So before the wars, etc. in Syria, we ran 2 programs, and I stopped the programs. And I stopped the programs because of 2 really important facets. First of all, the entrepreneurs told me that as soon as they became successful, they would get approaches for people to have a major shareholding in their company, and therefore they would lose their company. So they always did not want to get above the parapet. But secondly, and this came as a massive shock to me, I asked them, what is the biggest personal challenge you faced in your life? And there's almost unanimity amongst male entrepreneurs that they were unable to marry the girl that they loved. The reason for that is their parents would not accept an entrepreneur as a husband for their daughter. So we stopped running those programs. So unless there's the political, cultural aspects within the country conducive to entrepreneurship, I felt it was better that we didn't give hope and aspiration to people who, to be honest with you, would not be able to be successful. Is that the last question, Kat?
Yep, that's the last question. We're just a little bit over the hour, so apologies. So that there are still a few questions coming through, so what we'll do is we will just reply back to those people individually. But I just want to say thank you very much for everyone for your time this afternoon, or for this morning if you're in the US area. We've had some great questions, and we hope that you've also gained from the engagement. We will be circulating the slides as well as the voice recording to everyone who registered for the webinar in the next few days. So do look out for that. And then if you do have any further questions, or you wish to discuss the paper further, or the analysis, or any other sort of data regarding our program or regarding the impact data, please do reach out to us. And on that note, thank you very much.
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
Just one last comment. So my recommendation to each of you is, if you haven't got a mentor yourself, find one. And if you can find somebody yourself to mentor, please do. The impact is huge. Okay, thank you, Rosalie, for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and evening.